Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Hello, and thank you so much for joining us on the Science of Magic. We're coming to you through the X-Zone Broadcast Network, Digital Broadcast Network, and Digital Satellite Network. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. For a millennium, humankind has looked to the stars for guidance and understanding as to our role in the larger scheme of things. Many cultures have developed their own form of astronomy to map the heavens and astrology to chart the influence of the planets and stars have on those of us living on the Earth's surface. Shamans from all cultures recognize these influences and their profound effect on person, place, or thing. Many shamanic cultures believe their ancestors came from the stars. Most sacred sites built by the ancients have one thing in common. They line up with some aspect of stellar events. Some of these structures were designed to create amazing shadows, such as the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. Shadows cast by the rising sun create the fabled feathered serpent that ascends the 9 terraces of the pyramid on the spring equinox. Others frame the sun, like the ancient Neolithic mound in Ireland or the Mayan site of the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. At this site, the rising sun on the spring and autumn equinoxes shines through a central doorway of the temple towards a single erect stone. Yet others were built to face the sun as it rises on the morning of the spring equinox, like the cat-like Sphinx at the Gaia Plaza in Egypt. There's also evidence that during the era of 10,970 to 8,810 BC, the Leonian Sphinx gazed directly towards the rising of the constellation of Leo, which would have preceded the sun at dawn on the spring equinox. Why this age-old fascination with the great beyond? These structures were built by people in ancient times who had knowledge of spiritual process that leads to enlightenment. This process has a direct relationship to the Earth's relative positioning in the heavens and the balance found therein. All things have frequency, including human beings. At the quantum level, we each carry a unique set of harmonies that are as individual as our fingerprints. The exact bandwidth of frequency being emanated by the heavens and on the location and at the time of our birth has a profound influence on our personal frequency and the way we relate to ambient ones. It is this imprint that the personal astrological chart outlines. By understanding the ambient influences as well as our personal ones, we can be empowered to intelligently chart our path in the ocean of light we call reality. So what is the science behind these concepts? As I mentioned, everything produces frequency, some more scientifically measurable than others. There are 2 major kinds of frequency waves, mechanical and electromagnetic. Mechanical waves require a medium through which to propagate, but don't displace the molecules of the medium as they move through. Electromagnetic frequencies waves don't require a medium to propagate and therefore can travel through the vacuum of space. Its electromagnetic frequency we'll be examining this hour and its role in astrology. Light is an electromagnetic frequency. Each planet, star, asteroid, or comet emanates its own distinctive set of wavelengths. These bands of frequency combine to create unique emanation of solar systems, constellations, galaxies, and beyond. At any given time, we on Earth are being bathed with a symphony of frequencies from the universe that shift and flow with a constant motion of heavenly bodies. This is one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite scientists. Everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. And that was Albert Einstein. When we consider reality from the frequency perspective that good old Albert so eloquently outlined, it shines the influences of the stars on our experience in a whole new light, so to speak. That is to say, the combined frequencies bathing our planet at any given time set up the music to which each of us dances in our own chosen way. My guest this hour has spent the last 45 years of his life studying the science of astrology. the divination of the influences of the stars and planets on human affairs and terrestrial events. After a short break, I'll introduce our guest, my favorite astrologer, all the way from the UK, Stephen JUDD. This is The Science of Magic, and I am your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is professional astrologer and author Stephen JUDD. Stephen graduated with an MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology from Bath Spa University in 2005. Steve was born in England in July 1955. After leaving the Army at 20, Steve found his first astrological book in 1980 and then spent a decade learning astrological basics. At that point, he was totally self-taught, and over the next 30 years, he expanded his ability by doing 30,000-plus chart readings. Since 1998, Steve has impressively increased his astrological career, starting when he began work for the astrological phone lines. He's written many times in the national press, in the Daily Mirror, and the Daily Mail. During 1999 through 2000, Steve worked as a real-time Internet astrological consultant for World International Television. He now works solely for himself, and for the last 12 years, doing astrological readings has been his only source of income. Steve has considerable experience on local media and has appeared on national TV. His free webcasts are a feature in YouTube. In July 2005, Steve was awarded the Master of Arts degree in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology at the Sophia Center, Bath Spa University. He now has an office on Walcott Street in Bath and the distinction of being the only astrologer in the UK to have a drop-in practice. Stephen is a published author. His books are The Bedroom Astrologer and The Lore of Pluto, Reshaping the Void. He's currently in the process of writing a book entitled Mercury. All of Stephen's books are available on his website, www.stevejudd.com. The Bedroom Astrologer is also available on Kindle through Amazon.com. Stephen offers free monthly forecasts on his website. Naturally, donations are always appreciated. He also provides personal charts and individual readings for a fee. To listen to his monthly forecasts and frequent updates, or to contact Stephen for a private personal astrological reading, visit him at his website. Again, that is www.stevejudd.com. STEVEJUDD.com. Hello, Steve, and welcome to the Science of Magic.
Hello, Gwilda. Nice to be here.
So what's it like there in the UK?
Well, we're heading into winter. It's cold, it's raining, but it's not too bad at the moment.
Well, that's good. A little bit of overcast never hurt anybody, at least if you're not if you're used to it, huh?
Well, it's England. What more need I say?
Exactly. I'm in the high desert, so I could use a little bit of that moisture myself. So, Stephen, you graduated with an MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology from Bath Spa University. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about the university and its history in training astrologers?
It doesn't so much train astrologers. What happened was that In the late 90s, a group of astrologers came together and said, we need astrology to be back in the university. The last recorded professor of astrology was in 1600 in the University of Bologna in Italy. So 400 years is a long gap. So a few astrologers put some money together, approached Bath Spa University and said, we'd like to do an MA here. And they said, yes, please. So for the first 4 years of the Sophia Centre's existence, it was based at Bath Spa, and about 30 to 40 people graduated with the MA. I was number 13 on the graduates list. It's since moved to Lampeter University in South Wales, and now there's about 200 people out there in the world, of which only about 50 of them are in the UK. The rest are global, all with the Masters in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology, and we now have the first PhDs out there. Unfortunately, they're not called Doctors of Astrology. I think they're called Doctors of Applied Cosmology or something like that, because we can't still have the word astrology in the university. But certainly the idea of getting astrology back into a more academic world is now fully engaged.
That's really profound. I love to see the old arts coming back and being recognized as the sciences that they are. And of course, that's what this program is about. You said 1600 was the last time it was taught in university. How old is astrology?
Well, the earliest, how old is a piece of stone? I mean, the earliest records of humanity referencing the heavens in some type of pattern go back to Neolithic times from about 40,000 years ago with the cave paintings in the Dordogne in France. There's clear signatures there of the constellation of Taurus and the Pleiades carved into caves hundreds of feet down. So 45,000 years ago, our ancestors were drawing reference to the sky and the patterns in the sky and attributing some type of meaning to them. And but as far as modern astrology goes, most contemporary historians will accept that astrology started with in the Mesopotamian triangle, primarily with the precursors of and Babylon and Assyria, around about 4,500 BC.
That's a long, long time. What I find interesting is shamanism is also about 40 to 50,000 years old and probably older, and that most of your shamanic practitioners throughout the ages until recently have been very fascinated with the stars, stellar events, and used something very similar in their practices. So it all kind of originates in the same place, doesn't it?
Well, it's one of the oldest dictums in astrology is as above, so below. And as you and I have discussed earlier, astrology and shamanism have quite a few common roots in that, unlike most other forms of intuitive practice, astrology and shamanism use a blend of symbology, mathematics, geometry, and intuition to be able to work out their practices.
Coming from all sorts of different aspects of our being. In other words, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, imagination, symbology, archetypes, all that fun stuff blended together kind of ends up giving us a panoramic view of the things that are going on at any given time, would you say?
I would actually, yes. And there's been some very good work done recently by a guy called John Martineau in the UK, who's proved that the placings of the planets in the heavens and their orbital speeds are not random, but the patterns they create are so perfect that the chances of their positioning being random is infinitesimally small. He doesn't go on to speculate what does place those planets in those positions, but the fact that they're not random suggests that there is a greater unifying force behind much of the phenomena that we currently call astrology.
The intelligence of the universe, so to speak.
Yes, it's a lovely way of describing it.
You know, I've heard you say that you feel you're on a mission and have volunteered to come on planet to help effect a necessary change in consciousness. How exactly do you see that, Mr. Stephen?
Well, it seems that over millennia, humankind has pondered its existence, and one of the most commonly asked questions is, why am I here? why am I on planet Earth at this time? And for many people, the answer to that can be found in terms of greed or power or sex or fast food or television and the attributes of modern life. For a few others, there's a much deeper existence, looking for a more philosophical understanding of the higher emanations and higher reasons why humanity's here. I choose, having studied well over 35,000 charts in my life, I've come to the conclusion that there is no such thing as death, and the human experience is just a 70 to a 100-year cycle where we exist in three-dimensional physical form, but that when we die, we just pass over into a different form of consciousness. If I accept that as being reality, which I do, then it seems logical. The next step from there is logical that we volunteer to come here for a specific purpose. And I believe that purpose is to actually enlighten the earth, to make the earth a lighter place, primarily through bringing humor and joy into our lives and trying to cheer up the world around us.
So do you speak of the human world? Because it seems to me like the natural world, without our interference, is doing quite nicely in unity and enlightenment.
Excuse me, coughing. I actually think that if humanity weren't here, the natural world would get on with itself and it would be fine, but there wouldn't be the kind of stimulus for evolution that there is with humanity. To quote Terence McKenna, human history represents such a break in the biological systems of organization that preceded it that it must be the response to some type of attractor, magnet, or dwell point in the future that is pulling us forward.
And to misquote a formula, and I wish I could quote it correctly, but there's this proven mathematical formula that says that causality is equal parts past and future, but the only way it can take place is in the present. Does it relate to that?
It does, because one of the things I've realized is that the past only really exists in our memories and in the history books, and that the future is as yet unformed, and that all there is basically just moments of now constantly repeating themselves. But in every moment of now, there's hundreds of different potential timelines emanating out into the future with all the different potentials that they have, which is why I believe that words like free will and choice play a major part in the human experience and its collective future.
Human beings, being conscious as we are, or unconscious in certain cases, have the ability then to intend or consciously choose outcome. Do you see that as being different than in the natural world?
Oh, definitely. How many other species on this planet can look in a mirror and recognize themselves? How many other species can anticipate futures or make things happen for themselves? And for that matter, with the possible exception of cats and dolphins and whales, how many other species have this concept of humor in their life? Possibly chimpanzees, but not many others. So yes, humanity is very, very different to anything that's ever existed here before, which is why I'm not convinced that the actual nature of intelligence, perhaps the human body, but not the intelligence that goes with it, is a natural biological thing that's naturally evolved.
Thank you, Stephen. We're going to have to take a short break. We'll see you on the flip side. This is the Science of Magic. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka. the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. This is the Science of Magic. Welcome back. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is professional astrologer Stephen JUDD. He has an MA in Cultural Astronomy and Astrology. Welcome back, Stephen.
Hello.
So when we signed off, we were talking about evolution of consciousness. And you think that the planet is about to take an astrological leap of sorts. What does this look like to you?
Well, the astrology in itself doesn't say what will happen. It acts as a kind of metaphorical language to describe what could happen. It's certainly, the horoscope is basically a blueprint of potential, and it gives the windows of opportunity and the potentials for positive things to happen or challenging things as well. I still retain the belief in human free will, and humanity does have an amazing ability to screw up given the choice. However, some people really do aspire to a more enlightened way of living, a future based on words like integrity, dignity, and consciousness. And it seems that slowly this is becoming more and more the norm, or at least the polarization between the two different camps is getting stronger and more equal. So in that way, yes, I'm hopeful about the long-term future for both humanity and, of course, for the planet.
So you say you're hopeful. What's the other alternative?
Well, if humanity continues to enmesh itself in greed, power, sex, fear, television, processed food, etc., it seems that the entropy and the decay, the moral and the spiritual decay that seems to be happening in many places in the world will continue to grow, and entropy will ensue, and as a result some type of stagnation will result, and inevitably out of that we'll see something like population decline, possibly some type of pandemic, the rise of technology so that humanity isn't so necessary anymore. And ultimately, of course, over a period of many hundreds of years, humanity will simply fade away, possibly to be replaced by some other intelligent species.
Do you see this as a DNA devolution, if you will?
Only when I'm in a more pessimistic mood, Gwilda. I choose to believe in a positive outcome because basically I'm an optimist and I do have hope for the future. And besides that, I've got grandchildren, so I want the planet to be a beautiful place for them to grow up into. But the more I'm seeing the sort of environmental degradation of the planet, the more sometimes I despair of humanity's willingness to recognize what type of planet they're really living on.
One thing that's kind of come to me very strongly over the years working in these realms is that there's a difference between Pollyanna and denial and positive focus on desired outcome. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I like to believe that humans create their own reality. Well, my glass is normally 51% full most of the time. But when I hear of people, and I know a lot of them, unfortunately, whose lives are humdrum and who believe in everything they read in the newspapers and watch on the television, and they eat the processed food, and they buy the junk newspapers, and then they go to the churches where they're told to what to believe, and then they end up getting cancer, so they go and get the chemical medicine treatments, and then they die. And I end up thinking, well, what a waste of a life. As opposed to people who go out and raise their eyes to the sky and the heaven, and who whistle whilst they're walking, and who bring an element of joy into their lives, because these are the people who generally have a more fulfilling and hopeful life. And I truly believe that in the long run, this is the type of future that is best for the humanity. A much more positive outlook. Positive mental attitude, PMA, is the single best thing we can do for ourselves individually and collectively.
What do you see as your role as an astrologer in helping this process, Stephen?
Well, as an astrologer, my skill is interpreting patterns and being able to make other individuals aware of those patterns, both in terms of potentials and challenges. And I'm not in the business of healing people, because I think that most healers are just con merchants. Anyone who says they can heal anyone else is either a true psychic or else genuinely a con artist, one of the two. But what I can do, and what other people like me and you can do, is we can empower others into healing themselves. I think we're catalysts, not so much healers, as we catalyze other people into waking up and smelling the coffee, smelling the roses, and seeing the world the way it really is. And as a result, making positive changes in their life, thus improving their lives and the life of the planet as a result.
So again, we go back to frequency. If you're taking the drugs and eating the GMOs and listening to hype and hysteria and negativity, it tends to compromise your frequency. Where if you're aligning with nature, looking to the light, looking to moving forward rather than stagnating, then your frequency rises, and as with that expands your potentiality to walk this river of light that the astrology charts. Is that accurate?
That's a very good way of putting it, and I would take it one step further. You talk about frequency. Let's just actually look at that in an astrological way. For example, using the planet Jupiter. For those people who still have old-fashioned valve radios, you can hear Jupiter's radio bursts at the bottom end of the shortwave. It pulses about 13 times in bursts every 11 minutes. And if you can hear Jupiter's radio waves on your radio, then it's a fair bet to say that the frequencies of Jupiter are actually hitting your body and hitting your consciousness. So if you can tune into this, even if it's subliminally, and just wish for it to be so, then it's pretty sure that this is going to work in a positive way for you.
And if it happens to be striking in a place where your personal frequency aligns with it, then you can even be more empowered by it during different times?
Now that's what I call synergy, Gwilda, or else 2 and 2 equals 5. Yeah, that's a wonderful time. That works.
So we can consciously tune into different energies at any given time, but they're more naturally supportive based on where they sit in our chart at any given time. Is that correct?
Yes, it's the ability to be able to understand one's horoscope and to be able to choose the optimum times for manifesting projects, opportunities, potentials, or to know when to sit tight and hunker down. That's a skill, and if you're capable of doing that for yourself, and the art of the astrologer is to be able to empower others to be able to do that, then it certainly makes one hell of a difference in one's personal lifestyle.
So again, you're talking about personal empowerment, not leading people by the nose or predicting what's about to happen. Is that why you give me 6 different astrologers that are writing for different newspapers, and they'll come up with 6 different predictions? They're reading at a different frequency level?
Yes, but I would also suggest that newspaper astrology isn't worth the paper it's written on, because it's very generalized, and I know that most astrologers who write in newspapers don't write their own stuff anyway, because I used to write for nearly all of them. So I treat newspaper astrology with a mild degree of contempt, unfortunately.
Just a mild degree, huh?
Yes, I'm being deliberately polite here, Gwilda. Yes.
I appreciate that, Stephen. So when we become more aligned with what our sign is versus what's going on around us, how can that empower us as individuals?
Let's put it this way. If you know that, for example, Jupiter in the sky is making a really beneficial aspect to your sun or to your moon or to your ascendant in your horoscope over a period of a week or two, then you can go out there with your head held high and you can actively look for windows of opportunity. And when you find them, as you always do, you know that if you take them, your glass is 52, 53% full, and you stand a much better chance of being successful than you would, for example, if, for example, Saturn was opposite your sun or your moon or your ascendant, which is much more a time of weeding and pruning and streamlining rather than growth and expansion.
So it sounds like you can go on with your life, but it's kind of like paying attention to the weather. That's really an exciting concept. You know, you pay attention to the weather, you dress for it, you take advantage of it. Stephen, we're going to have to take another break here. We'll be back on the flip side. You're listening to The Science of Magic. This is Gwilda Wiyaka. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our theme song, One People, One Nation, is from the album The Winds of Time by my musical group Starfire and can be found on iTunes, CD Baby, Amazon.com, and my website, www.gwildawiyaka.com. Our guest this hour is professional astrologer Stephen JUDD. Stephen, welcome back.
Thank you.
So I've got a real interesting question for you here, Stephen. How do you see astrology and our evolution of consciousness as having their foundation in matter-energy science?
Ooh. Now, we could really get into things like Heisenberg's uncertainty principle and particle wave theory here, but it's very late in the evening here in the UK, and I don't know if my mind is quite able to manage that one. Instead, what I would suggest, one way of looking at this is to look at recent advances in contemporary astrology. Just in the last 20 years, since the advent of the internet, for example, I describe the internet in many ways as artificial intelligence. All of a sudden, astrology and the internet are absolutely made for each other. And some of the advances in modern astrology just in the last 20 years have been exponential. For example, 20 years ago, we could never have dreamt of putting a person's horoscope on a map of the world. Now it's commonplace, and it's easy to send people to the best and the worst places for things like relationship, career, romance, residence, things like that. So it's very much a question of bringing heaven down to earth, if you like, if that makes any sense.
It makes a lot of sense to me, and I find it interesting what you were saying about, what's the name of that science that is in your science, in astrology, where you've picked the optimum place for a person at any given time in their life based on their intention?
That's called astrocartography. That's where
that
you
makes
actually...
sense. And it occurs to me that that's what animals do all the time. They naturally migrate higher or lower based on what's going on. You see them go to higher ground before tsunamis strike. They seem to be in tune in a way that we've forgotten. And I think there's probably a stellar influence for bird migration and everything else. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I've been in a number of total eclipses of the sun, both in the UK and elsewhere, and seen what animals do, how they all come down to Earth and group together in little circles, tight groupings, just for 2 or 3 minutes. It also happens at eclipses of the moon, but not so strongly. And, of course, animals are much more in tune with the natural and organic rhythms of the Earth, something that humanity, because of its desire for more consciousness, has perhaps gone without. We've kind of given up on that because we're not so in tune with the planet as perhaps we could be.
So it seems to me like our strive for consciousness has been mental consciousness to the deficit of our spiritual consciousness, our emotional consciousness, the information that comes to us through our subtle bodies, through imagination and symbology. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, I think so, because although we live in basically an animal body that still picks up the signals, I believe the interpretation of that is now based much more on a mental construct rather than an animistic construct. And humanity tends to focus much more these days on the intuition, the mental stuff, rather than the instinct, the animal stuff. And one of the things around astrology, especially since the discovery of the planetoid Chiron, half man, half horse, has been the trying to blend the intuition back with the instinct, trying to blend the human back with the animal, which again I believe is a fairly strong concept in shamanism as well.
Absolutely it is. And I find this another interesting point, is that you said after the discovery of Chiron, but just because we discovered it doesn't mean it wasn't there before. Can you explain that to me, what you mean there?
Well, when planets are discovered, it seems that their archetypes suddenly emerge into the consciousness. For example, when Pluto was discovered in 1930, it was a time of the mafia underworld, it was the cracking of the atom, it was the emergence of psychotherapy, the development of plutonium. When Chiron was discovered in late 78, prior to that, who had heard of aromatherapy, astrology, shamanism, homeopathy? But since the early 80s, these have emerged into the common parlance, and everyone knows about them now. So as the planets get discovered, so their archetypes seem to enter the common consciousness.
So because we create our own reality, as their archetypes enter to the common consciousness, they become real to us, and therefore their frequency is more part of our reality. Is that correct?
Very much so. I think we're going to see a major surge over the next couple of years in the use of psychology, for example, with the recent photos of Pluto. Pluto rules the underworld, whether that is the psychological underworld, the criminal underworld, or the chemical underworld. And now that we've got photos of Pluto, we're going to see psychology coming much more into the workplace, into the home, into all areas of life.
I think that's going to be a welcome change. Many of us understand about the planetary influence on people. Would you mind telling us about people's influence on, and I quote a friend, the natural dance of the solar system and beyond?
Well, I said earlier, as above, so below. Another way of saying it is the microcosm reflects the macrocosm. Humanity does seem to have this knack of reacting to planetary phenomena in the heavens, whether they're aware of it or not. And I wouldn't go so far as to say that humanity affects the movement or of the planets, but it certainly affects the meaning of the planets and the way that we choose to understand them. And the more, once again, coming back to consciousness, the more we aspire to a higher form of consciousness, the more we look for the higher meaning of these planets as guidelines and help towards a better future for us all.
So we're back to the frequency thing. We can relate to these planets or constellations in a different way based on the frequency that's ambient for us at the time?
Very much so. For example, most people who are aware of astrology would recognize Saturn as being the planet of limitation, restriction, blockage, frustration, and authority. Yeah, that's true. But also, Saturn's also the planet of self-discipline, hard work, structure, boundary, and ultimately success through one's own self-disciplined hard work. So it's got its good sides as well. This is only recently being recognized. It's always been seen as the real hard work, the hard one, but now it's got its good sides as well. And I view this as people becoming more balanced and more positive about potential outcomes.
So each of these signs really is kind of like two sides of the same coin. How we experience it in our lives is which side we care to look at. Stephen, if you wouldn't mind, do you have a message for our listeners?
If I was generally, the single best thing I say to people is A, keep going, and B, do it with a smile on your face, because you've got the choice of being unhappy about your life or being happy about your life. And if you're happy about your life, then generally it does get easier and get better. So smile, and the world smiles with you.
I love it, Steve. So you're saying that if we are looking to the positive, again, not in a Pollyanna way, but rather focusing on it, that's what we create around us?
Exactly. But I emphasize what you just said. This is not airy-fairy, pie in the sky. This is based on self-discipline, focused hard work, and making one's life better through aspiring to a better future.
Stephen, it's been a real joy. I hope to have you on the show again sometime.
My pleasure, Gwilda. I've really enjoyed it. Big love to everyone in the USA.
Thank you, Stephen. You've been listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Until next time, may you be blessed with knowledge and comforted with love.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation.